Thanks for watching our internet edition of Nightline. Tuesday, March 20th, marks the 4th anniversary of the American invasion of Iraq, already longer than the U.S. involvement in World War II and soon to be longer than the Civil War. But questions persist about just how the Iraq War began. Did the lies of one man lead the nation to war? And did the CIA know not to trust him? ABC's chief investigative correspondent Brian Ross has an ABC News exclusive.
His name and face were kept secret by the CIA, and so, say former top officials, was the belief that he was a fabricator, even as his tales helped lead this country to war. When he defected from Iraq to Germany, European intelligence services gave him a randomly assigned code name that would later prove prophetic: Curveball.
The Europeans called him Curveball.
And he threw quite a curveball, didn't he?
He threw quite a curveball.
This is the only known picture of Curveball, provided to ABC News by intelligence sources and seen in public for the first time tonight.
I believe, yes, that looks like Curveball. And you can't say his name, so I wouldn't do that, but yes.
That's the man.
Yeah.
Few people came to know more about Curveball than Tyler Drumheller, the then head of CIA operations in Europe. Now retired, Drumheller says his top two bosses at the CIA ignored his repeated concerns that Curveball was not to be believed.
This was a failure. People died because of this.
It was Curveball's information that formed the basis for a key portion of Secretary of State Colin Powell's speech to the United Nations 6 weeks before the war began.
One of the most worrisome things that emerges from the thick intelligence file we have on Iraq's biological weapons is the existence of mobile production facilities used to make biological agents.
Curveball was not mentioned by name, but he was the secret source cited by Secretary Powell, who displayed elaborate graphics with drawings of the supposed mobile biological weapons labs, all supposedly seen by Curveball.
The source was an eyewitness, an Iraqi chemical engineer who supervised one of these facilities.
None of what Secretary Powell said that day about the mobile labs was true. In fact, Drumheller says he actually crossed out all those references in a draft of the Powell speech he had been sent a few days earlier.
We lined out that paragraph completely, redacted it, as they say, and
you literally underlined it and would you
scratched it out?
Say don't say
yes,
this.
Say this is from Curveball. Don't use this. And so we sent it back to him, and I thought we'd accomplished what we set out to do.
Drumheller says he was stunned to watch Powell at the UN deliver the very words he had crossed out.
I said, did we send the wrong speech back to him? And I asked the executive officer. She said, no. She said, I made a copy of it here. This is what we sent back. And it was the line. And she said, they just didn't listen to you.
Curveball defected in late 1999 to the German intelligence service, headquartered in a well-hidden complex outside Munich. He said he was an engineer, and Drumheller says the Germans, in effect, told him what they wanted to hear.
They sort of did leading questions. They would say, do you know anything about mobile biological weapons? Because we're really interested in that. And Curveball's a clever guy, and he said, yeah, I could. And to their credit, the Germans said they could never validate this. They never verified it.
But Drumheller says Curveball's reports were seized on by the White House, especially the Vice President's office, as a confirmation of their beliefs about Saddam Hussein.
No American had ever actually debriefed him. It had always been done by the Germans, and then they passed it on to us.
And was that trusted?
Well, it shouldn't be, no. But it was by some people, yes.
And Drumheller says the German intelligence agency refused to allow anyone from the CIA to interrogate Curveball.
Right off said, don't ask for this. This is going to cause a problem. And he's sort of an unstable guy, and we have to move him around a lot. And
unstable.
Yeah, immature guy, and he's got some instability problems, and we've had problems with him over the years.
And did you make this known?
Yes.
Drumheller says he went all the way to the deputy director of the CIA, the number 2 man, John McLaughlin, recalling a meeting also attended by McLaughlin's chief of staff.
I said, well, I didn't say, his chief of staff said first, Tyler's worried that Curveball may be a fabricator. This case may be a fabricator. And John said, oh my, I hope not. And because he said, this is all we have. And I said, this can't be all we have. I said, there must be something else. And they said, no, this is really the only tangible thing we have.
Drumheller's account has now created a deep split inside the CIA because McLaughlin, now retired and a CNN analyst, adamantly denies the meeting with Drumheller ever took place.
This man never came into my office, sat down, looked me in the eye, and made a case that Curveball was a fabricator. That didn't happen.
As to Drumheller's attempt to take curveball material out of Secretary Powell's speech, McLaughlin also denies that took place.
I never saw a redacted copy of Secretary Powell's speech from Mr. Drumheller, and as best I can determine, neither did anyone else in the chain of command.
Whoever heard Drumheller's warnings, Secretary Powell told Nightline he is furious with the CIA for its failure to warn him that there were suspicions about Curveball, which was meant to be the highlight of his speech.
It was almost that which made the whole case seem effective. It was just so dramatic.
Secretary Powell's chief of staff at the time, Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson, says he believes Drumheller's account about the meeting with McLaughlin.
That's the most disturbing thing that I've heard in the post-presentation world, is that John McLaughlin talked to Tyler Drumheller, chief of the European Division, at length about this, and yet we never heard a single word about any doubt during the preparation for the Secretary's presentation.
Nobody said there are some doubts about this.
Not a soul.
There are questions inside the CIA about this.
Not a soul. No one said anything. In fact, it was the exact opposite. This is powerful stuff.
Wilkerson says he and Powell spent days at the CIA headquarters going over every line of the speech, and he says McLaughlin personally misled him about the 3 other sources that supposedly independently corroborated Curveball when they had not.
His eyewitness account of these mobile production facilities has been corroborated by other sources.
And John McLaughlin must have said this 3 times, independently corroborating one another. That is to say, they had no contact, they didn't know each other, they all independently corroborated this information about mobile biological laboratories in Iraq.
I don't remember saying that, and it astonishes me how so many people can look back now and have verbatim recall of a lot of these incidents when we were going a mile a minute and dealing with 100 issues all at once.
Based on what you know now, do you believe that George Tenet and John McLaughlin lied to you?
I think they hedged the truth. I think they hedged the truth, particularly John. He's the professional. He's the guy with all the years in the intelligence community. He should have known better. John should have been the person who stood up and said, stop this train.
In hindsight, knowing all that we know now, focused like a laser beam on this case, that would have been a good thing, but it wasn't deliberately withheld. It wasn't a matter of trying to deceive anyone.
As for Curveball, he is believed to still be living in a small town outside Munich, still protected by the German intelligence service, even though every piece of information he provided has now been officially retracted by the U.S., what's known as a burn notice. And when confronted, finally...
He just stopped talking and said, that's all I'm going to say.
And then you knew.
Yeah, and then we knew, and then they issued, they came back. They had to issue the burn notice. It's going to be a long time to come back from.
All off this.
One little guy who all he wanted to do was stay in Germany.
Secretary Powell declined to appear on Nightline tonight, but he told me on the phone in strong terms just how angry and disturbed he is that the CIA never gave him any reason to believe there was any question about the source, who he would learn only later was called Curveball. Cynthia.
Brian, will someone be held responsible for this at the CIA?
Not really. In fact, if anything, people are pointing their fingers now at Mr. Drumheller, saying, if you were so upset, why didn't you complain louder? Of course, in his book, he says he did.
Brian Ross, a very explosive report. Our thanks. Curveball and the discredited case for war. And tonight on Nightline, a new documentary takes a look at the incredible expansion of American debt. More people than ever before have ready access to thousands of dollars beyond their means. It's a safety net if a family hits a rough patch. But are credit companies preying on American consumers?
You're like this pirate on this pirate ship, right? And you got that person, and you're walking them out on the plank. And you walk them as far as you can out on that plank without pushing them off. And then you bring them back to get what you want.
America Maxed Out. That's tomorrow. That's today's Internet edition of Nightline. Thanks for downloading us. I'm Cynthia McFadden. For Terry Moran, Martin Bashir, and all of us at ABC News, all the best for the rest of your day.